Stealing Sweater Girl's sweater was a lot easier than I expected. Early in the semester, I locked myself out of the dorm room by accident, and someone else on my floor showed me how to break in using nothing but a credit card. I went to her dorm during one of the popular class times when the dorms were practically empty, and got into the key-carded stairway by following someone else through. Then I found her dorm room, and after knocking to ensure the roommate wasn't around, I let myself in. It's frankly a bit alarming how easy it is to force the lock. I suppose that's what happens when the dorms haven't been updated since they were built in the 70s. All the rooms still have phone jacks, radiators, and the world's weakest deadbolts. Sweater Girl's side of the room was empty. There were no sheets on the bed, no computer, nothing. Like she had never been here at all. I started to panic upon seeing it. Did her parents come and get all her things? Had I waited too long to make an attempt to save her, and now the sweater was halfway across the country in the hands of her worried parents? Even if I saved her before midterms. I threw open the closet, trying not to give in to despair so soon. There, on a hanger, was the sweater. It was the only thing in the closet. Like it was just waiting for someone to come along and claim it. I carefully removed it from the hanger. Then I turned to go and heard a key rattling in the lock, trying to open the already open deadbolt. I stood there dumbly, trying to think of what to do. I could always hide in the closet, but there was no telling how long I'd be stuck in there. Besides, that was incredibly creepy. I wasn't sure I could bring myself to do that. Breaking into someone's room was bad enough. So I stood there, frozen in indecision, as the door swung open. I stared at the roommate. The roommate stared back at me. Nervously, I held up the sweater. I said, I left this here and the door was unlocked. I have class soon, so I didn't want to wait. She narrowed her eyes at me, glancing at the desk to make sure nothing of hers had been disturbed. She seemed to relax when she saw everything was untouched. Do I know you? She asked tersely, clearly unhappy to find someone in her room. No. I knew your roommate, though. Do you know where her stuff went? What roommate? I got lucky and got the room to myself. She had a roommate. I knew she did. I was positive this was the right room. For a moment, I was too surprised to say anything. I just stood there in shock and stared at her, the sweater held up in front of me in both hands. Previous semester, I finally ventured. Whatever. That's not my sweater, so if you say it's yours, it's yours. Please leave. I hastily obliged. Heart pounding, I hurried past her and down the hallway. This is not a big campus, but hopefully I'd get lucky and never run into her again. This has been awkward enough already. I messaged Grayson to let him know I had everything I needed. We agreed to meet that evening and try the steam tunnels again. It was a long wait. I suppose this time I had no doubts that we'd find the laundry lady, and all those fears I'd been burying came crowding in. It was hard to focus. I tried to study anyway. We went down to the tunnels after dinner. Nothing happened on the way over. Selfish as it might sound, I was kind of hoping the steam ghost would show up and chase us off. That would be a valid reason to try this another day. But I knew the longer I put it off, the worse I'd feel when I finally rescued her. So on we went. Grayson stopped me before I could open the door to the tunnels. He said my name, and I turned to look at him. He had an earnest expression. Are you sure you want to do this? Me? I replied, startled by the question. I feel I should be the one asking you that. All I'm doing is standing by the door. Sure, I didn't expect a creepy laundry lady to have an alternate world on campus, but I'm adjusting to the idea. I'm figuring it out. You're the one that's actually going to go inside. It'll be fine. I have my 3 items. The hero always succeeds with them. What if, Grayson said softly, you're not the hero? I wrenched the door open and acted like I didn't hear his question. He had said it very quietly after all. But why was I doing this? The question ate at me as we descended the stairs into the tunnels. I felt obligated, but that was something I imposed on myself. I guilted myself into this. I was the one that convinced myself that because I was the one that got stolen away, I had to also be the one that rescued her. Was it fair? Was it right? Would we fault someone that failed to run into a burning building without any training, equipment, or knowledge of what they were doing? I had some knowledge, and I had my 3 items and my weapon, but I certainly didn't have the training or experience to handle inhuman things. I feel guilty saying all this. If I didn't go, no one would, and Sweater Girl would be lost forever. Part of me even resents Grayson for bringing up such doubts at such a crucial time when I couldn't let my resolve waver. Just as before, we planned to travel from my dorm to hers. Grayson seemed jumpy once we were down in the narrow tunnel. He kept glancing back over his shoulder. I told him about the steam monster prior to our first attempt, but I guess now he actually believed that it existed. Fortunately, we reached the exit without instant. I clutched the candle in its container to my chest. The fingernail was in my pocket, the sweater was tied around my waist, and my weapon dangled from my arm in a plastic bag. I placed one hand on the door and opened it. A pleasant warmth washed over my face, smelling strongly of detergent. Before me stretched the laundry room. It went on for as far as I could see, an endless row of dryers. They toiled noisily, and a couple doors flicked open, spitting out a pile of clothing to add to the carpet of laundry that covered the floor. "Guess we found it," I whispered. "Yeah, we did." Grayson leaned over my shoulder, staring intently at the room before us, his hand pressed against the door just above my head. "How long should I wait before assuming you're lost?" he asked. "An hour?" I guessed. My stomach twisted uncomfortably at the question. "Let's make it 2, and then I'll start making my own rescue plan, okay?" I admit that almost broke my resolve. The thought of being trapped in that endless expanse of clean laundry for however long it took Grayson to come up with a plan, assuming he ever found the door again. I glanced down at my hands, trying to come up with something to say, something lighthearted to reassure both of us. Inside of its case, the candle flickered, like it was going to go out. "I'm out of time," I whispered. I turned and stepped through the doorway. The rumbling of the dryers reverberated in my chest, drawing out the hammering of my heart. It felt like standing next to a train. I stumbled across the uneven piles of laundry, clutching the candle in its plastic box to my chest. At least the path forward was clear. There was only one direction to go, straight. The heat filled my lungs, a dry heat that sapped the moisture from my lips. By the time the doorway was out of sight, far behind me, I was wishing I'd brought something to drink. My mouth was parched, and even the nervous sweat on my palms was gone, leaving behind cracked fingers and knuckles. Fear and uncertainty didn't feel like such a great excuse to have left Sweater Girl here for so long anymore. Up ahead, I saw a plastic table. Piles of laundry were stacked around it, neatly folded jeans and shirts, piles of socks that had been paired and laid out on top of each other. It was the only source of order I'd seen so far. A young woman was hunched over the table, folding the clothing with shaking hands. I'd found her. She began to tremble violently as I approached. She did not look up. Hey," I said awkwardly. She glanced at me, startled to hear a human voice. Her eyes widened, and she gestured at me frantically to come closer. I carefully picked my way through the stacks of laundry around her. She told me in a low voice to come stand next to her and help fold, to not look around no matter what I heard. "How long have I been here?" she asked, once I'd done as she'd asked. Her voice was on the verge of breaking. "A while," I said. Did I fail my classes?" "Ah, yes. College student priorities. Totally normal." "No, midterms are next week." She made a weird, strangled noise, which I think was somewhere between laughing and crying. I risked a sideways glance at her as I picked up a pair of jeans. She was in bad shape. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her cheeks were gaunt. Her hands were worn and bleeding, and now that I was closer, I could see dark stains on all the clothing she'd folded. "Is the laundry lady keeping you here?" I asked. "Yes, she said I deserved to be punished for what I did. And when I'd learned my lesson, she'd let me go." She spoke in an urgent whisper. I watched her hands as she folded. Her movements were mechanical, honed by practice, and her work was impeccable. I don't sleep, I don't eat or drink, but I'm so hungry, so thirsty, and so tired. I forced myself to ignore the desperation in her voice. I had to focus on getting her out. As I tried to think of what to say, I began to feel something strange, like there was someone hovering just over my shoulder, watching everything I did. I raised my head to look behind me. "No," Sweater Girl hissed. "You can't look. She doesn't like it when you stop focusing on your task, and you need to do it just right." She took the shirt out of my hands and deftly folded it before setting it aside. "She's very picky," Sweater Girl said. "She'll get angry if you fold it wrong." "Did she hurt you?" I whispered. "No, she wouldn't even raise her voice. She'd just tell me to do it again and again until I did it right." "Did you try to escape?" "Once. I walked and didn't find anything but rows of dryers. Then she came and found me and dragged me back to this table. She took everything I'd folded and threw it on the ground and said she'd do worse if I tried again. I've been too scared to do anything but fold since." "I've got an idea of how we can get out." No. She sounded close to tears. I glanced over again and she was shaking her head back and forth in short, nervous gestures. "We can't," she continued. "Look at our feet." I looked down and saw under the table something sticking out from beneath a t-shirt. I kicked at it and unearthed a human skull. For a moment I was frozen in place, my breath trapped in my chest. Sweater Girl elbowed me and I hastily began to fold again. That presence felt closer now, like it was looming just behind my back. I folded furiously, taking care to line every hem up precisely despite my nerves. Slowly, the presence receded, and I was able to breathe a bit easier again. "There's bones under everything," Sweater Girl said. "I see them every time I have to fetch more clothing. And that thing that's watching us? She'll go away eventually. She only leaves me alone when she's confident I'm working. Like the fairy tale, I thought, when the antagonist is punished by being forced to dance to death. Sweater Girl was condemned to fold laundry until she gave up and died. Or until her unseen captor grew tired of her. "She's never going to let you go," I hissed. "That's not how these things work. Besides, I don't think you have much time left, do you?" She didn't reply. From the way her movement slowed, though, I knew I'd guessed right. She knew it too. Her will to keep going was faltering. "Here's the plan," I whispered. "I'll cause a distraction, then we run for the exit." "That's it." "It's all I got," I said. And I pulled my weapon out of the bag. "Oh no," Sweater Girl said with resignation as I set it down on the table. "Yep," I replied grimly, and I unscrewed the cap on the bottle of bleach. Then, like a belligerent cat, I tipped it over and watched as the contents began to pour out onto the ground. "Oh no," I cried in mock dismay. "The clothing is going to be ruined." That presence swooped in on us. It shoved us aside, scattering us away from the table, hard enough that I lost my balance and fell. Sweater Girl managed to stay on her feet, and she began to run as I directed. At the table, the laundry lady was frantically setting the bottle upright and pulling out the clothing the bleach had landed on. I could see the blotches from where the bleach had done its damage. I couldn't help but feel a moment of satisfaction for the chaos I brought to her domain. Then I was scrambling to my feet. "Go, go, go," I yelled at Sweater Girl. She was way ahead of me. We sprinted towards the exit, while the laundry lady shrieked and cursed behind us. I'd hoped that the bleach would cause a big enough mess that we could make it to the exit, but there was so far to go and the terrain was so difficult to run on. There was no stable footing. We were within eyeshot of the door when I felt that presence growing behind us, like a gale about to break upon our backs. Yet I didn't panic. I knew what to do. I had my 3 items. The candle was the key. The sweater and the fingernail would aid our escape. That was how this worked in the stories. All I had to do was throw it behind me. I turned. The laundry lady was storming after us. Her sleeves rolled up and fury in her eyes, the wrinkles furrowed around her lips like canyons. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how hard I've worked for you all?" "We didn't ask for your help," I screamed back, and I threw the fingernail at her. It bounced off her forehead and fell to the ground. She kept coming at us like nothing had happened. That was when I panicked. This wasn't like the stories, I realized with horror. It should have done something. That's how this always worked. You threw something behind you and it became a wall of thorns or a river or anything to slow your adversary down. Instead, it had done nothing. In desperation, I grabbed at my feet for some clothing. I'd throw it at her face, I thought, and maybe it'd blind her for a moment. As I grasped the shirt and tugged, there was a ripping sound and the sleeve came off, still trapped by the heavy weight of the clothing it was tangled in. The laundry lady shrieked with dismay. I let go and kept running. I glanced behind me. She was stopping to gather up the shirt I'd left behind. This was it, I realized. No magical items, no tricks, just good old-fashioned destruction. "Grab some clothing," I yelled at Sweater Girl, "and fuck it up." She did as I instructed, grabbed a leather jacket and ripped the buttons off before tossing it behind her. I tore a hole in a nightgown and threw it over my shoulder. We stumbled and tripped our way to the exit in this manner, snatching up clothing and destroying it in any way possible, all to buy ourselves a few more seconds. Grayson was just ahead. He stood with his shoulder against the door, desperately holding out a hand to us. Sweater Girl reached him first. He pulled her forward, towards the steam tunnel, towards safety. And then a hand closed the sweater around my waist. It began to drag me back. Sweater Girl reached out her hand to me, her other hand clasped around Grayson's arm, who still held the door open. I fumbled at the knot holding the sweater on. It came loose, and then we were all falling backwards, out of the laundry room and into the damp heat of the tunnels. Grayson slammed the door shut behind us. There was a heavy impact on the other side, an enraged wail, and then silence. None of us spoke much on the way up to Sweater Girl's dorm room. I didn't tell her roommate had forgotten her. I wanted to see what would happen, honestly. I figured it was because of the rain that she didn't remember, like how it was likely brainwashing security. Or perhaps it was self-preservation, as was the case with the cafe manager. I wasn't really expecting what we found. Her room was filled with her things again. Her closet was full of her clothing. Her laptop was on her desk, and her roommate greeted her as if she'd never left, and when Sweater Girl introduced us as her friends, she didn't seem to have any recollection of who I was. Should I really be surprised? We're dealing with inhuman things. No, an inhuman place. This whole college is tainted. Reality twists itself about to be what it needs to be, rather than what it is. At the time, I was too worn out from our escape to spend much time questioning it. I was just grateful that Sweater Girl's reintroduction was going to be easier than I expected. All she had to do was make up for all those missed classes. Simple, right? Meanwhile, I had to figure out what to do with the candle. I certainly didn't want to keep it around anymore. So I went searching for the devil, and I found him, just as I'd found him the first time. "Oh no," he said, smiling broadly enough that I could see his very white teeth. "That was a gift. You don't give gifts back." So instead, I gave it to Sweater Girl. I told her what it was. She stared at me in horror, holding the container at arm's length with both hands. "And I have to keep this safe my whole life?" she squeaked. "Just don't get it wet," I said, desperately trying to make the situation better. "Get one of those waterproof lockboxes or something." She continued to stare at me with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Then, very evenly, she said one last thing. "I wish I'd never met you." It was said without anger or malice. She didn't even say it like it was my fault. She was just a very tired and very scared person who was now coping with the aftermath of her life being upended. It still hurt. I guess I was expecting her to be grateful. Maybe that's selfish of me. Maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I just wanted to be the hero too badly. I thought I'd feel better after rescuing her, but I don't. I feel like I set one weight down and picked up another, because I've realized a couple things. First, things here don't follow established patterns. The rule of 3 didn't work. I don't think it's a case of not having used them correctly either. That's how it goes in the stories. I did it exactly as I was supposed to. These creatures I'm dealing with don't follow the rules. They have their own, or perhaps none at all. And the second thing is that I can no longer use the laundry room in case the laundry lady comes after me again. I have to start using a laundromat off campus, and I don't know anyone with a car yet. The curse of the first day. I woke up in the middle of the night, gripped by a sudden, sharp pain in my stomach. I had felt pain like this before, but this time it was different, like something inside me was slowly tearing my body apart. No pills, no sips of water could ease it. But it was the first day of classes in a new semester, and I forced myself to get up even though I felt that something terrible was about to happen. During class, I tried to focus. I was even enjoying the lecture, but then a strange feeling overcame me, a deep rumbling inside. It felt like a warning. I stood up to quietly leave the room, but the pain intensified suddenly. My breathing grew shallow and a ringing filled my ears. The journey to the bathroom felt endless. Hallways, once familiar, now seemed foreign, as if I were wandering through a labyrinth. When I finally found the door, relief washed over me. But as soon as I stepped inside and closed the door, the lights began to flicker. Instead of the usual white tiles, I saw filthy, dark walls that seemed to pulsate as if alive. Suddenly, I heard a voice, quiet, whispering, and it sounded like it was coming from inside my head. "You can't escape." I looked around, but no one was there, only silence, broken by the faint hum of the flickering lamp. I tried to ignore it, but the pain in my stomach grew worse. I sat on the floor trying to collect myself when I heard another sound, a baby crying. The sound came from the stall next to me. I looked under the door. No one was there, but the crying grew louder, morphing into a desperate wail. I flung open the stall door. It was empty, but on the wall, written in blood, were the words, "You are not ready." When I ran out of the bathroom, I felt as though something was following me. Shadows on the wall seemed to stretch out, reaching for me. I forced myself back to my room to change my clothes, which, for some reason, were mysteriously stained, though I couldn't remember how. In my room, things got even worse. Bloody handprints appeared on the mirror, and from the vent came a sinister whisper. "Come back." I tried calling my mom, but my phone only showed static, as if there was no signal. Desperation overwhelmed me, and I realized this wasn't just pain. Something was using my body. Something was trying to break free. I went to the health center, where the nurse, looking at me, suddenly went pale. Her hand trembled as she said, "This isn't your illness. It's something else, something that's been waiting to escape." Panic consumed me. By that point, I couldn't eat, drink, or even speak normally. My friends tried to comfort me, but their voices felt distant. In my dreams, I saw something emerging from me, a dark, shapeless shadow with bloody eyes that whispered quietly, "I am a part of you." On the third day of this nightmare, I couldn't fight anymore. I lay in bed, hearing heavy footsteps echoing through the hallways. The door to my dorm room opened on its own, and in the darkness I saw those same eyes. They stared at me, as if waiting. "This will never end," something in the darkness whispered. I don't know how this will end, but if you're reading this, stay away from the place where the pain begins, because the one who comes through it will take more than just your body. This happened last year. Me and my friends had the bright idea to get fucked up on a Wednesday, so we got some weed and beers. There's a railway near our dorms, and it was the place to go to smoke, drink, etc. It was really cold, so two of my friends had already started drinking to warm themselves up. Just on the way there, I was having a weird feeling like we shouldn't be there. I disregarded the feeling to just try weed for the first time. We eventually got there, sat on the rocks that were there, and we started drinking and passing the joint around. After 10-ish minutes, I heard a twig snap. I asked my friends, but none of them heard it. My one friend, who was the closest to me, said, "You probably imagined it. When you get high, you get hella paranoid." I accepted it because I've heard it's normal. After a couple more minutes, I heard some shuffling in the bushes. Think of a small trail path and there being a circular area with big rocks, and the rest of it being bushes and trees. If you looked at it from a bird's eye view, it would look like a tree. This time, me and two of my other friends heard it. We looked at each other. One of my friends looked at the other four who were still talking and said, "Did you hear that?" Our oldest friend said, "Really? You two now? Nothing's there." The minute he said that, we heard a whisper say, "Are you sure?" in a raspy voice. It sounded like how a woman who's been smoking for years and just woke up would sound. The way the voice sounded also made it impossible for someone to impersonate it, so we all knew it wasn't a college student. We were all frozen. Then we heard that same voice laugh. It wasn't a laugh that would be made from someone laughing at something funny, but it sounded sinister. Then we heard the bushes shuffle again, so we all booked it back to our dorms. I don't think any of us have ever run so fast. Normally it would be a 5-minute walk, but we turned it into a 1-minute run. I really wish I could say this was it, but it wasn't. I always liked living off campus, but this was the one time where I really wished I lived on campus. At about 2 a.m., I had to go back to my place, so I got my stuff and started walking back. The bus was down that day, so I couldn't take it, and I had to walk 25 minutes to get to my place. The minute I left my friend's dorm, I had a bad feeling. I told myself, "It's fine, you're just being paranoid." Plus, someone had to have been playing a prank. After 5 minutes, I had a feeling that I was being followed. I looked behind me and didn't see anyone. I looked behind me every 30 seconds, and each time there wasn't anything there. When there was 5 minutes left, I heard the same shuffling in the bushes, and I froze again and stared exactly where I heard it. I stood there for at least a minute. The only reason I actually started moving was because I heard the same laugh. I ran as fast as I could and made it to my apartment's main office in less than a minute. There's always a cop in front of the office, and when he saw me, he looked really concerned and asked me what happened. I didn't want to tell him, but what choice did I have? I told him that I heard some weird laughing in the bushes, and it scared the shit out of me. He asked me where. When I told him, he nodded and said, "You too, huh?" I asked him what he meant, and he said that 3 other people had told him about it, and no one could figure out what it was. He told me that I should start taking the bus and come back to my place earlier. I said, "Yeah, I will," and walked off. Again, I wish I could tell you this was where it ended, but it didn't. When I got back, I took a shower and got in my bed and tried sleeping. When I fell asleep, I woke up and thought it was weird that I woke up from how tired I was. And when I checked the time, it said 4:36 a.m. This was even weirder because that meant I only slept for about 45 minutes. That's when I heard that same laughing again. I lay up and looked around, and when I looked straight, I saw the shadow of something. It didn't look human, but it didn't look like an animal either. It was on all fours, and what it said after scared me to the point where I stopped sleeping in my apartment and pretty much moved into my friend's dorm. It said in that same voice, "I know you're in there, John, and I know you're up," and it laughed. That entire night, I just lay down, trying not to cry from fear. I didn't have to really worry about it for much longer because it was a week before finals week, and I had gotten accepted to another school that I wanted to go to. I don't really ever tell this story because from the people I've told, they either thought I was joking or I wasn't fully sober. I know exactly what I heard that night, and I know I wasn't hearing things.